Yesterday, the state's longest-serving senator announced he will not seek a sixth term in office. Dick Durbin was first elected to the Senate in 1996 and re-elected 4 times. Before that, he served in the House for 14 years. The 80-year-old currently serves as the second-ranking Democrat on Capitol Hill. His term will end in January 2027.
And Durbin got up early to join us. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Well, it's good to be with you.
So I think a lot of people are wondering, why now? You know, you've had many clashes with President Trump and the tides are shifting, but you told the New York Times, man, I don't want to miss this fight, but it looks like you might miss part of it. Huh?
Well, I'm going to miss part of it for sure, but for the next year and a half, I've got a job to do representing the state and the issues that are important. It reaches a point where it's time, and as Paul Simon used to advise me, you know, you want to leave at a point where you still want to stay, and the people that you represent still want you to stay. I think I'm at that moment, and yesterday's response was an indication of that.
Many in the Democratic Party have complained that the establishment has not been aggressive enough against President Trump. The DNC vice chair is pouring millions of dollars into a younger generation of Democrats who are going to challenge incumbents. What are your thoughts on that?
It's healthy. It's healthy for us to have this conversation in our party, to talk about why we lost the election and why Donald Trump won it. And I think there are plenty of issues. Now, there are some people who are not rational in their thinking. They believe that we have control in Washington, which we don't. We're in the minority in the House and the Senate. The limitations of what we can do. I still think there's value to doing things on a bipartisan basis where we can. But there are some fundamental issues that we differ on when it comes to the national level with President Trump.
Are there some pivots the Democratic Party need to take on some of these policies that the American public voted with Donald Trump on?
Well, of course, and some of those we were prepared to do, obviously. One was to strengthen our border security. That needs to be done. We should never knowingly allow a dangerous person to come in this country or someone seeking citizenship to stay in this country once they have been convicted of a serious crime, period, end of quote. That, I think, should be the starting point. But we also ought to be humane in the way we treat people who are here. I introduced the DREAM Act over 20 years ago. I said if you were brought here as a child, for goodness sakes, your parents made that decision, you didn't make it. And if you've lived here a good life and want to be a citizen, you ought to have that chance. I still believe that. I would go beyond that. We had a bipartisan approach to it, which basically said if you're undocumented, step forward, register with the government, pay your taxes, and we won't deport you. You can continue to work. You know, there should be sensible, humane approaches to that. And I'm afraid some of the policies coming out of Washington now are not.
Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders have been touring, speaking to large crowds. Do you see the party moving more to the left?
Well, there's, of course, a force toward the progressive side. And let me add quickly that Bernie Sanders is 2 or 3 years older than I am, and he's still going. It's an indication that the number is not important, but the condition is. He and AOC generate these huge crowds in red venues, and it's an indication that we should never give up, even in our own state with areas that are voting the other way for president. We ought to be reaching out to them to make sure the conversation continues.
You talked about bipartisanship. We don't seem to have a lot of that now. I mean, you have a close relationship with Charles Grassley. You work closely with Orrin Hatch. Why, it doesn't seem like that happens anymore. People are just yelling at each other. We saw that at this, you know, State of the Union. It's just, it seems crazy. How is it when you're in the trenches?
We're not legislating enough. We're giving speeches at one another instead of sitting down and saying, well, let's tackle some of the issues. You know, we want to make sure that Social Security survives, and in a few years, it's going to face some tough choices. If we move on them now, it's going to be easier. It's tougher politically, but it's easier when you consider the important policy changes that might take place. That ought to be a bipartisan issue. I was in the House of Representatives when it was. I think that's something we ought to move on.
One bipartisan issue is big tech. Parents are concerned about their kids and the addictive nature of these algorithms. You were successful. It reminds me of big tobacco, and you were successful in taking them on. Why hasn't either party attacked big tech and solved this issue for parents?
Big tech is much bigger than tobacco or any entity you can think of, and much more money involved. And yes, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, a pretty diverse committee of Democrats and Republicans, we had unanimous votes on 5 measures to help parents who are scared to death of what the hell's happening when their kids are sitting on those screens all day long. I'm concerned about my grandkids and other children as well. We need to do that, and it's going to take some guts to do it because big tech is fighting us every step of the way.
You've been critical of this Doge and Elon Musk. Is there need to be some cutting in government? Everyone who is the average layperson thinks government is big everywhere, and there could stand to be some cuts.
And they're right.
Yeah.
And I was on the Simpson-Bowles Commission, a bipartisan commission. I was the liberal who voted for it and said, it makes sense, let's do this. I wish that it had been embraced and followed through. I had one of the members of the commission send me a text last night reminding me that we work together. We can do this on a bipartisan basis, and maybe that's the only way we can do it. But right now, we are fighting a different battle. What President Trump is trying to do it defies the Constitution as far as I'm concerned. It is basic to our democracy that we get this part of it right, and then we can talk about policy.
What's next, pickleball?
Well, what's next is I took my 5-year-old granddaughter to Wrigley Field last night for the first time, and the Cubs won. So she's a good luck charm.
Before we let you go, Paul Simon anointed you. Are you going to endorse anyone to take your seat?
I don't have a plan to do that. Many of these folks have come forward and said if I was running, they'd support me, but now they're going to be on their own and try their best. I'm going to let the people of Illinois decide, except if it gets in some unusual, peculiar circumstance.
All right, Senator Dick Durbin, thanks for getting up with us this
Good to be
morning.
with
Thank
you.
you, Senator.